The year is 1993, and we have some excellent heavy metal and hard rock to talk about. A lot of familiar faces in unfamiliar places, and a lot of really iconic live albums that are going to be recognized by the Grammys this year. Who are they? What live albums are we talking about? Find out next. Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to another episode of the Metal Dude Abides. Tonight we are in the Fixing the Grammy series. We're in the year 1993. Now, if you're new to this series, we go through each year and talk about the best hard rock and heavy metal. We started way back in the late 60s. We're going all the way to current day and talking about some iconic heavy metal music. And quite frankly, how the Grammys never seem to get it right. We'll see if they do better this year. Spoiler alert, probably not. So this year, the Grammys nominated both a hard rock category and a heavy metal category. So as per usual, we're going to start with hard rock, but stick around. We're going to talk about some really good heavy metal right after that. All right, the Grammys' first nominee in the hard rock performance category, a familiar face, in maybe a little bit of a different place. AC/DC. They put together a long-awaited live album, just entitled AC/DC Live, and the Grammys nominated them for the song Highway to Hell. Now, this is interesting. I'm not really a big fan of giving live material credit into the Grammys unless it's just earth-shatteringly good, right? Because, again, these are songs that are kind of a best of. I thought it was kind of funny when this album came out. Someone was talking to Angus Young and said, "Why are you guys putting out a live album right now?" And he goes, "Well, we all started looking around each other and said, we better do this before we're dead." So kind of a funny little side note on this. Now, I think Highway to Hell is an interesting choice because this is really the first time on a record we're starting to hear Brian Johnson doing Bon Scott material. Of course, Bon Scott, the original singer of AC/DC, who tragically passed, his big run was in the 70s. So this is the first time we really see now, well into the 90s, Brian Johnson doing his material live. Now, Highway to Hell is a good song, but if I were just being real picky about it, I think Brian Johnson's version of Dirty Deeds is a little bit better. And honestly, if I'm going to pick one song off this album to say this is Grammy nomination, it is another Brian Johnson song, but I think their live version of For Those About to Rock is sensational. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to keep AC/DC because, again, this is just another live album. I don't think it's anything earth-shattering. So AC/DC, unfortunately, is getting pitched. In its place, I'm going to go with Lenny Kravitz and his song, Are You Going to Go My Way? Wow, this was a global phenomenon. Lenny Kravitz had been putting out some pretty interesting music, but this is the song that kind of sent him into the stratosphere. Interestingly enough, the Grammys did recognize this song in the Best Rock Song of the Year. It was a nominee. But I think Lenny Kravitz kind of leans into, well, he's not in the metal category by any means. I think he definitely leaks into that hard rock vein. I think the song is just unbelievable, just moves and grooves so well. One of my favorite all-time songs. Lenny Kravitz, Are You Going to Go My Way? The Grammy's second nominee is Living Colour with their song Leave It Alone. I think Living Colour is a really good band. I thought their very first album, Vivid, was their best album. They put out a couple albums in between. I think Stained, while it's not one of those albums that gets a lot of credit, I think it's their best album since that very first album. However, I don't think Living Colour at this point in time, with all the competition, rises up to Grammy levels. So Living Colour, you're also getting pitched. I think my second nominee is going to be a bit of a shocker for some people because I'm going to go with Vince Neil and his song Can't Have Your Cake off his surprisingly excellent solo album Exposed. So Motley Crue has had their big run, one of the biggest bands on planet Earth. Motley Crue decides to part ways with Vince Neil. And a lot of times when you have an artist break up, a singer in a band in this case, it's kind of important of who gets back out on the scene first. And Vince Neil beats Motley Crue right here and puts out his solo album before they put out their album. Maybe that's why, but I just think this is an excellent album. Vince Neil brought in one of my favorite guitarists, Steve Stevens, and they put on a really heavy rock and roll performance here. I think there's a reason Vince Neil ends up back in Motley Crue, because this album outshined anything Motley Crue was doing. Pretty hilarious that Vince Neil, after one album, Motley Crue has to tuck tail and bring him back into the band. Also, another funny side note, they made a video for this song, Can't Have Your Cake, featuring a very young, up-and-coming model by the name of Pamela Anderson. You know, the woman who just in a couple years would be married to Tommy Lee. I wonder if Tommy Lee was secretly checking out his future bride by watching his old buddy's videos. Makes you wonder. Our second nominee, Vince Neil, Can't Have Your Cake. The Grammys' third nominee that year, Robert Plant, with the song Calling to You, off the Fate of Nations album. I love Robert Plant. I think he's one of the most iconic singers in the history of hard rock. His run with Led Zeppelin, legendary. And he had some really interesting stuff as a solo artist. Unfortunately, by this point, I don't think his music is really, it's good. Again, I don't want to diss Robert Plant, but I don't think it's keeping up with the times. I think there's some much better music being portrayed here in the early 90s. So Robert Plant, with all due respect, is getting pitched. The third nominee for the Metal Dude Awards is a band by the name of Collective Soul and their song Shine. It's kind of funny, we're talking about Robert Plant, a veteran of the hard rock music who has been on the scene at this point well over 20 years. And here comes Collective Soul, a brand new band on the scene. This is their debut album, Collective Soul, one of my favorite bands, one of Mrs. Metal Dude's favorite bands. They have a string of really big hits in the 90s, and it starts right here with this sensational song, Shine. The Grammys' fourth nominee is Smashing Pumpkins with their song, Cherub Rock. Well, I am a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan. But if I'm going to pick one song off their tremendous album, Siamese Dream, it's not going to be Cherub Rock, believe it or not. It's a song called Disarm. I think this is the best song on the album and maybe in the entire discography of the Smashing Pumpkins. We've kind of hit this point, especially in the hard rock category. You'll start to notice that I'm mostly picking songs rather than albums. At this point, I'm mostly listening to heavy metal albums still, but with the hard rock, I'm listening to some stuff on the radio. Again, this is before the internet. So I'm really finding more and more songs, more so than so many albums. But make no mistake, I was very tempted to put Smashing Pumpkins in as the best album of the year because Siamese Dream has so many great songs. But since the Grammys went with a song, I'll go with a song. So our nominee, we're going to pitch Cherub Rock, but we're going to keep Disarm. The fifth and final nominee by the Grammys is also the band that they're going to give the award to, Stone Temple Pilots with their song Plush. Now, without going into too big of a rant, if you've been on the channel before, you know I'm not a fan of the double dip, which means a band puts out an album one year, gets nominated for the album, and then the very next year they come in and they pick a song. Or sometimes they completely ignore the band album completely or the song completely, but they're like a year later they recognize it. The fact of the matter is, Stone Temple Pilots put out this wonderful album last year. It was one of the bands we talked about last year, so it doesn't really belong in 1993. So for that reason, not because the song isn't fantastic, it is, but you got to go back to 1992 when it was made. So Stone Temple Pilots is getting pitched. Our fifth nominee, a brand new band by the name of Tool. Perhaps you've heard of them. Now, we all know Tool is going to go on to be one of the biggest bands on planet Earth, but this is their debut. The song I'm nominating is a song called Sober, off that inaugural album Undertow. Man, this song is so intense and so creepy. They had a video for this. One of my all-time favorite videos, by the way, if you ever want to go check it out. It has like these claymation figures. It's very dark, very disturbing, and it really just adds to the creepiness of this song. Of course, it tackles a very serious issue: alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and some of the people they knew that were suffering from this. I think this is by far the best Tool song that they ever did, and it is, the first song they came out right out of the chute with. Really dig it. So again, our 5 nominees for Best Hard Rock Performance: Lenny Kravitz, Are You Gonna Go My Way? Vince Neil, Can't Have Your Cake. Smashing Pumpkins, Disarm. Collective Soul, Shine. And finally, Tool, Sober. And the winner is... For those who know me, this will not be a surprise, but for those who don't, it might be a big surprise, because I'm going with Smashing Pumpkins, Disarm. This album and the following album from Smashing Pumpkins are among my favorite albums of this whole decade. Really love Billy Corgan and the bunch. I think this is the thing about Smashing Pumpkins is all of their songs seem so intense. One of the songs that really came close was Tool with their song Sober, and it's for the same reason, just such intensity. Some of these other songs, they really rock. Lenny Kravitz rocks, Vince Neil rocks, Shine, very good song by Collective Soul. But when you really want to get to me right here where I live, you got to have that intensity. You have to have that emotion. And this song has that in spades. So congratulations to Smashing Pumpkins for their unbelievably good album, Siamese Dream, and the great song, Disarm. All right, we're now going to talk about the best heavy metal performance of 1993. The first nominee from the Grammys, we're going back to the live albums again. I Don't Want to Change the World, Ozzy Osbourne off his live album Live and Loud. Once again, the Grammys nominating a live track. I have a little bit of a hot take on this one. If I was going to nominate a song off this live album, it would be the song Changes. First and foremost, I Don't Want to Change the World just came out a couple of years ago, and wasn't one of my favorite songs off the No More Tears album. So I'm not sure why this one caught the Grammys' attention. Whereas Changes, we're going all the way back to, Sabbath Volume 4. So kind of a much longer way, and a kind of a different version of it than what you hear all the way back in the mid-70s. But the other reason is because it's all about me. And Changes was recorded at Red Rocks Amphitheater the night that I was there, supposedly celebrating Ozzy's retirement. So at about the 3:50 mark, you can probably hear me yelling, "Ozzy rules!" Anyway, I don't know that I've ever been on a Grammy-nominated recording before, so if I was going to pick one, I would pick Changes. But again, this is just a live album. It's not anything worth writing home about. It's a very good live album, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's Grammy-worthy, so it's getting pitched. Instead, we're going to nominate a familiar face in an unfamiliar place, because we're going to nominate the band Anthrax for their unbelievably good album, Sound of White Noise. Now, for those of you who know, I am a huge fan of John Bush, who at this point is known as the lead singer for Armored Saint. Well, Anthrax has been going through a little bit of a commercial lull and ended up firing their lead singer, Joey Belladonna. After having some auditions, brought in John Bush for what I think, beware, hot take alert, the absolute best Anthrax album of all time. I think this is an absolute masterpiece. First of all, you have the great hit on here, Only, which James Hetfield himself says is the perfect heavy metal song. They also have a very good song called Black Lodge, and a deep track on there that I personally love, 1,000 Points of Hate, kind of a mocking of George Herbert Walker Bush's Thousand Points of Light. This is a very underrated album, and I think a lot of Anthrax fans never really accepted John Bush. They were Joey Belladonna fans through and through, but give this album another try. Again, I think it's the absolute best Anthrax album and one of the best thrash metal albums of all time. The Grammys, to use an old expression, are always a day late and a dollar short, because their second nominee is White Zombie with their song Thunder Kiss 65. A sensational track, but a track that came out in 1992, that we talked about in 1992, and doesn't belong being nominated in 1993. So we're pitching it. Our second nominee is another familiar face in a really unfamiliar place, because our second nominee is a band by the name of Fight, and their sensational album War of Words. Now, if you're not familiar with Fight, don't be embarrassed. Probably a lot of people are not. But this is where Rob Halford went after he quit Judas Priest. He joined up with a group of guys from Cleveland, Ohio, of all places, to form the band Fight. Now, if I were to describe Fight to you, I would say this is the combination of Pantera and Judas Priest mushed together. Much more groove metal, maybe even some elements of nu metal sneaking in there, but with that beautiful heavy metal vocals that made Rob Halford so successful. One of my favorite songs of all time is a song off this album, Nailed to the Gun. Immortal Sin is good, For All Eternity, one of the best songs that Halford sings on here, and the heavy, crunchy Contortion. Fight doesn't last but 2 albums, and this is clearly the better of those 2 albums, but when they come out, this first album, this thing is ferocious. The Grammy's third nominee is a song called Institutionalized by Suicidal Tendencies. I like Suicidal Tendencies, but I'm at that point where there's still really good albums out there, and I really feel uncomfortable just producing, a song here. While it is a very good song, I think there's an album that I think rises to the occasion just a little bit better. If you're familiar with the series, you'll know that way back in the 80s, this band brought home not 1 but 2 heavy metal albums of the year. Sabotage, with their album Edge of Thorns. And once again, maybe this is a familiar place with an unfamiliar face, because this is the first album that does not have lead singer John Oliva on it. Kind of. He doesn't sing on the album. He does play some piano on a couple of beautiful musical interludes. But this introduces us to the brand new lead singer, Zach Stevens. This is also, unfortunately, the last album for Chris Oliva, as he's unfortunately killed by a drunk driver shortly after this album was released. This is a beautiful, sensational album by Sabotage. It kind of moves away. Keep in mind, their last album was an album called Streets, a rock opera that was very progressive and very symphonic. They kind of move away from that, kind of back to more of a guitar-heavy, straight-ahead rock and roll sound. I really dig this album. Very underrated album. Our third nominee, Sabotage, Edge of Thorns. For the fourth nominee, the Grammys lean back into a live performance. Fear of the Dark, Iron Maiden, off their live album, A Real Live One. Now, once again, I'm very picky about putting live material as nominees for Grammy Awards, simply because I would much rather give awards to brand new music produced that year than take a song from the past that we've already should have considered for an award and then put it into a live material and act like it's something brand new. However, I came very close to keeping this live track for one simple reason. The one reason I will keep a live performance is if it is the absolute best performance of a song. If I go to a song and I only listen to the live version of it, that's the kind of example of you made the best version of it here. I believe Fear of the Dark is 10 times better live than it is on the studio. And it's for one simple reason. This is the perfect heavy metal song for crowd interaction that's not forced. The crowds sing along, they participate in this. There is actually goose pimple inducing parts of this song live because of the crowd interaction. It is an absolute masterpiece. However, at the end of the day, it was a tough decision, but I went ahead and decided to pitch it because even though it's great, it's still just a single song, and there's a couple of albums I still think deserve the recognition for 1993. Our fourth nominee, Life of Agony, for the album River Runs Red. Now, this is another one of those bands that puts out one of the best albums of the year. I would say a perfect album. And what's really cool about this is their very first album. So to hit on such a perfect performance right off the bat, very rare. And it's a concept album to boot. So the complications of coming out with your very first album, making it a concept album, and doing this good of a job is unbelievably difficult. Now, if you want to know Life of Agony, if you miss them, what's their story? Well, it's kind of like if you took Volbeat and mixed it with Black Sabbath. They have that really cool, like baritone vocals, but these big, heavy, distorted riffs. I really dig this. This is a band that kind of doesn't get credit. You don't hear much about nowadays, but if you go back to 1993, pull this bad boy up, I think you will be pleasantly surprised. The Grammys' fifth and final nominee, a familiar face, Megadeth, with their song Angry Again. Really good song. It shows up on the movie soundtrack for the Arnold Schwarzenegger hit Last Action Hero. But similar to Iron Maiden, I find it hard to put a song in when there are so many good albums to choose from. So Megadeth, while this is a very good song, it's getting pitched. This fifth and final nominee was a real difficult one for me because you had so many iconic albums, so many influential albums that came out, genre-defining albums that came out this year. It's incredible. So I really thought about going with Cathedral and their album, The Ethereal Mirror, one of the early doom metal albums. I also thought about going with Paradise Lost and their gothic masterpiece, Gothic. But at the end of the day, if you've been watching your channel, you know one of my favorite music genres of all time is melodic death metal. And this year, Carcass comes out with a defining album called Heartwork. While many people will look at the melodic death metal and focus in on all the great music that comes out of Sweden, this actually comes out of Britain, and it's one of the most important albums in the foundation of melodic death metal ever. So once again, our five nominees: Anthrax, Sound of White Noise; Fight, War of Words; Sabotage, Edge of Thorns; Life of Agony, River Runs Red; and Carcass with Heartwork. And the winner is Anthrax, Sound of White Noise. I did love the Joey Belladonna era, and they go back, I think, right now. As a matter of fact, Anthrax is back with Joey Belladonna, so no harm, no foul. But this album is absolutely my favorite Anthrax album. John Bush, one of my favorite lead singers, he had just a string of great hits with Armored Saint. Putting these two together was absolute genius. Now they're going to put out a second album that they try to be kind of fit in with the more of a grunge movement, and it doesn't work at all. So you might, if you've heard, other albums with John Bush and Anthrax and went, what's the big deal here? Don't bother with the other ones. It's kind of a one-hit wonder with John Bush and Anthrax, and it's right here on this one. Sound of White Noise. So many good songs, so many deep tracks. Once again, if you just want to go hear one song, go listen to Only. James Hetfield from Metallica, who has an ear for music. Metallica does some of the best cover songs of all time because they have great taste in music. He called Only the perfect thrash metal song, and it is an absolute banger. Go check it out. But the whole album's good from start to finish. Love it to death. So once again, congratulations to Anthrax for the best heavy metal performance of the year. And congratulations to Smashing Pumpkins for bringing home the best hard rock performance of the year. Now let's go see what the Grammys were doing. All right, this year, 1993, was a big year for Whitney Houston. She wins Album of the Year for the soundtrack to the Kevin Costner movie The Bodyguard. Whitney Houston, one of the most beautiful vocalists in the history of music. Rest in peace, Whitney. Um, I'm not going to complain too much about it. Pretty good album here. I did find the song of the year was kind of interesting because it is the theme song from Aladdin, A Whole New World. Like, I thought that was a pretty good song. I watched this movie with the kids a bunch, it's pretty good for a Disney movie. But that song of the year, I didn't think it was that good, folks. I got to be honest with you. The best newcomer of the year, Tony Braxton. I mentioned also that you have Blind Melon, a grunge band, getting a nomination here. Kind of a strange deal. But once again, Fight should have gotten in there, I think. Fight was really good. Vince Neil doing a solo career, pretty good. And of course, Tool going on to be one of the biggest bands of all time. None of those bands even got a nomination. Tony Braxton, she's fine, I suppose, but again, heavy metal really being ignored again and again in the newcomer of the year categories. The male singer that year was Meatloaf. I'll do anything for love. Meatloaf's got a pretty decent pair of pipes. I guess I'll be okay with him. Rock performance went to Aerosmith, Living on the Edge. This is a little bit down the road. I think Get a Grip was a couple of years back, but anytime I guess a rock performance goes to one of our bands, great. But the instrumental of the year that year was very interesting. Steve Vai wins over Joe Satriani. And here's why it's interesting. I talked about this last year when Stevie Ray Vaughan won the instrumental of the year for a Jimi Hendrix cover. Here, Steve Vai wins for a cover of a Frank Zappa song. Now listen, Steve Vai probably doesn't care. He's got the trophies on the mantle. He doesn't care for what it was for. But Steve Vai is one of the greatest guitar players of all time. He's going to win in his career 2 rock instrumentals of the year. Both are from Frank Zappa covers. It seems kind of insulting to me. I love Frank Zappa, one of the greatest guitar players of all time. But to take up someone like Steve Vai and only give them awards because they were covering someone else's material seems like a little bit of a backhanded slap, even when you're giving them an award. One of the things that I've noticed lately the Grammys are really getting bad about is giving hard rock and heavy metal bands credit for covers from 20 years ago. We just talked about Soundgarden getting a cover from an old Black Sabbath song. Soundgarden is a great band. Yeah, it's cool that they're doing Black Sabbath covers, but that's not what's defining them. And Joe Satriani never has won a Grammy Award. We're talking about one of the most legendary guitarists in the history of rock, who's trained a number of people, including Kirk Hammett, never winning a Grammy. He has a song that year called Speed of Light that was on the Super Mario soundtrack. But I will be honest, Joe Satriani's got better. Steve Vai's got better than these two songs. For me, I think Labyrinth, a song from Sabotage, should have gotten a nomination. This is both John and Chris Oliva in one of their last performances together. Of course, Chris is on guitar, John's on piano, and it's a very beautiful instrumental. Doesn't even get a nominee. So disappointing, especially when you consider all the emotion around Chris passing and all of that going on. Grammys, you should have done the right thing here and given Sabotage at least the nomination, if not giving them the win all right out. Anyway, that's our show for 1993. Some, again, excellent heavy metal music. We are going to be in 1994 before you know it, and the best way to catch up on all these years, going all the way back to the 60s, taking it all the way to the future, is to subscribe, ring the bell, give it a thumbs up, and join with. We're here every Tuesday night. Join us and tell us. I'm always interested to see, what do you think was the best heavy metal of 1993? What do you think was the best hard rock of 1993? Put it in the comments below. And then again, join us as we get into 1994. We also do a lot of album reviews of current bands, so you don't want to miss any of it. Subscribe. But in the meantime, this is the Metal Dude signing off. Take care.